When you look at a website, you see all the nice headings, the lists, the neatly organized sections, but what if all of that visual structure just disappeared? Well, for a lot of users, that's their reality. So today we're going to dive into the invisible blueprint of a web page, the code that gives it meaning way beyond what you can see.
So let me ask you this. Is your website a clear map that anyone can follow? Or is it kind of a confusing mess for someone who can't rely on those visual cues? Because here's the thing, a site can look absolutely perfect, but be completely unusable if its underlying structure, its blueprint, isn't built the right way.
I want you to imagine trying to read a newspaper that has no headlines, no paragraphs, just one giant wall of text. Confusing, right? Well, that's exactly what a poorly coded website can feel like for someone using assistive technology. What you see as a beautiful, organized page can become a jumbled, useless mess when software tries to read it without that proper blueprint. And that's the exact problem we're here to talk about. All right, so here's our game plan for today. We'll start with what I'm calling the invisible blueprint. Then we'll define what we mean by information and relationships. From there, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of page structure, forms, and tables. And we'll wrap it all up with the one key takeaway you absolutely need to remember.
Okay, first up, the invisible blueprint.
So the hero of our story today, the rule that really guides this entire principle, is WCAG Success Criterion 1.3.1. Info and relationships. And really, its whole goal is just to make sure that the structure and the relationships we see on the screen are also there in the code for software to understand.
All right, Section 2, Defining Info and Relationships. Think of this as the official rulebook for structure.
Now, the magic phrase here is programmatically determined. I know, it sounds super technical, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It just means, can a machine understand the structure and the meaning of your content just by reading the code? If you make something bold to show it's important, is there also a tag that tells the browser it's important? That's the whole idea right there.
Let's move on to Section 3, Getting Your Page Structure Right. We're going to focus on headings and landmarks here.
So what's really interesting is this difference between making something look like a heading versus telling the browser it is a heading. A really common mistake is to just take a paragraph, make the font bigger, and make it bold. It looks right to you, but that's a failure because assistive tech just reads it as a paragraph. The correct way is to use a true H1 tag that tells the browser, hey, this is the most important heading on the page. You're coding the meaning, not just the look.
And this same exact principle applies to the sections of your page. Using a heading tag like an H4 just to get a certain visual style, that's a fail. It actually messes up the outline of your page for assistive tech. Instead, you want to use modern HTML elements like main, nav, and aside to clearly define what each part of the page is for.
And this is what's so great. Modern HTML makes this so easy because these landmarks are built right in. When you use a nav element, browsers and screen readers automatically know, okay, this is the navigation area. You use main, they know it's the main content. You don't have to do anything extra. Just use the right element for the right job.
Section 4, Forms that actually make sense. You guys, getting the relationships right here is absolutely critical for usability. Creating that perfect link between a text label and its input is a super simple 3-step process. First, give your input field a unique ID. Second, create your label. And third, this is the magic part, connect them by making the label's for attribute match the input's ID. Not only does this tell a screen reader what the field is for, but it also makes the text label clickable, which creates a bigger target for everyone. It's a win-win.
And here's what that looks like in the wild. On the left, just plopping some text next to an input field. There's no programmatic link there. That's a failure. But on the right, by using that label element with the for attribute, you create this strong, explicit connection that passes with flying colors every time.
So what about when you have a group of related things, like a set of radio buttons for a single question? Well, you've got to tell the browser they all belong together. You do this by wrapping them all in a field set element. Then, the legend acts like the main question or the title for that entire group. It creates a neat little package that software can understand.
All right, let's talk about tables. This is probably one of the most common places where that invisible blueprint just falls apart. And that's because for years, people used tables for visual layout. But their real job, their true purpose, is for displaying data.
A classic mistake is trying to format a table using a bunch of spaces or a pre-tag. I mean, it might look right visually, but to a screen reader, it's just meaningless gibberish, a clear failure. The only correct way to do it is with proper table markup, defining your rows, your headers, and your data cells explicitly.
And listen,
It's not even enough to just use a table tag. Your header cells have to be marked up with thir. If you just use a plain TD data cell for a header, that's a failure. When you use thir, you're giving the screen reader a map. It allows the software to announce the correct row and column headers for every single cell, which provides crucial context as a user is navigating through all that data.
And look, this quote from the official guidance says it all. Basically, they're saying, hey, while you technically can still use tables for layout, you really shouldn't. Using CSS for your presentation keeps the meaning of those table elements pure. They are for data. And trying to use structural tags like th inside a table that's just for layout, that's a definite failure.
So, we've covered page structure, we've talked about forms, we've tackled tables. What's the one big idea that ties all of this together? What's the final takeaway?
Here it is. This is your blueprint. Use HTML to describe the meaning and structure of your content, and use CSS to control how it looks. That separation is everything. And when you build these relationships the right way, you're not just helping screen reader users, you're helping search engines understand your content better, you're making your site more future-proof, and honestly, you're just practicing better design. Good structure is good design.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. If you stripped away all the visuals from your site, all the colors and fonts, what story would the code itself tell? What does your website's